Okay, so we're still in the first round. It's Vladimir Kramnik, the 14th world champion, against Wei Yi, the talked about Chinese prodigy. But he's not trying to cement himself amongst the world elite. He's already 27-43, so he's well on his way. But yeah, he's been much talked about in recent years because his rating or his career path early on followed that of Magnus Carlsen in many ways. So people are sort of waiting for him to take the next leap and enter the absolute elite of the world players. But here he is in Tata Steel. He has the black pieces against Vladimir Kramnik, who opened with knight to f3 and g3. And Kramnik has been employing these ready type of setups recently with relatively good success. g6 by black, both sides fianchetto their bishops, and after castling we have a symmetrical position. So white is first to break the symmetry here with c4, and now black's main choices are to take on c4 or to play c6. So c6 is a solid choice, but Wei Yi goes with d takes on c4. So Kramnik is happy to play this Fianchetto Grunfeld. He plays knight to a3. He wants to take with a knight on c4. And black breaks with c5, trying to liquidate the center. D takes c5 by white, and now black prefers to not let the knight capture on c4 and plays c3. Here white goes with knight to b5. And Kramnik has already played this against Topalov in that game. Excuse me, Kramnik took on, Topalov took on b2. And bishop takes on b2. In that case, white keeps the pawn on c5. Okay, we could say that white's pawn structure is a little bit weaker because he has two pawn islands here on c5 and a2. However, white gets a lot of activity very quickly here. And in the game he centralized his rooks and was slightly better. In our game, however, Wei Yi went with knight to a6. Okay, from here Kramnik took on c3, knight took on c5, offering the queen trade, but Wei Yi doesn't go for that. Bishop to e3. Black plays knight e4, further liquidation in the center of pieces, and now bishop to d4. Queen a4 had been played in Seoul against Bluebaum in 2017, and bishop d4 was also played in Giri against Grandelius in 2017. That game followed this path as well, trade of queens. Knight back to d6, where it stands quite well, protecting the b7 pawn. It's already protected and then enables the bishop to develop. Giri played rook f to c1, but Kramnik went with rook a to c1. We see rook d8 by black, and while the position is somewhat equal, white has a little bit of an edge because he has this rook on the half open file. Well, it's an open file actually, and he can put the rook maybe on c7 in some cases. The knight is slightly more active, the white knight, and the white bishop enjoys a seemingly better diagonal. From here, Kramnik claims some space with f4. We see king f8 by Wei Yi. He's protecting the pawn on e7, but also anticipating the battlefield being in the middle of the board. King f2. Kramnik wants to play at some point e4, and now he's ready to bring the king, just like Wei Yi, protect the knight. The king would stand nicely on e3. Bishop to g4. Bishop is kicked back, and now Kramnik grabs some space with e4. So he has the option of gaining some space on the king side. We see a rook trade, and now rook d1. So black is still very solid. Shouldn't have really nothing much to worry about, but Kramnik was probably very happy to get a game like this where he could play in the endgame and avoid the famous tactical ability of the young Chinese player. After e5, the knight jumped into f5, and Kramnik pulled the knight back to b3. He wants to keep the knights on. This knight has some options of pressing on squares like this, and now black must deal with the immediate threat on b7. He does so with bishop c6, but Kramnik pinned with rook to c1. Now the king is ready. A byproduct of this king f8 move. He's now ready to prevent any weakness here after a capture on c6. Knight c5, king drop back, and now knight d3. King naturally comes back. So Kramnik wants to have the knight on d3 instead of b3, more centralized. Typical small endgame technique, you know, that matters in the end. g4, kicking the knight and also advancing on the king side. Rook c4, the knight has to go back, and now f5. So White is gaining something here. Fire advanced pawns, he has space, and the byproduct of space is that you can often swing from one wing to the other, and the rook here on the fourth will do just that. He can swing over here at some point. The knight goes back to g7, and now Kramnik seizes his opportunity. He has built up his position nicely. Now he takes on c6. He has the better pawn structure, and rook. He plays knight c5 check, and then rook to h4. And this is actually hard to deal with. If you take on f5, Kramnik would take on h7. He's already attacking this pawn here. And if a move like rook f8 and h4 by white, we see that black's pieces are really tied down. This rook has to protect this pawn. Can't really move anywhere. If you try to activate it, you run into this fork. If you try to activate the king, you run into another fork. And this knight doesn't have a lot of prospects, so not a position you want to defend against Kramnik. So instead of this, black went with pawn to h5. However, h5 does allow f6. This hits the knight, and it's the only defender of the h5 pawn. So Wei Yi decides to give up a pawn. So take on f6. The knight has to jump, retreat to e8, and now we get the pawn on h5. And after black recaptures, there is rook to f5, picking up this pawn. So Kramnik will win a pawn here, but Wei Yi is hoping that he can get active enough to counter that. The knight actually has a nice outpost on d5, so he gives up the pawn. But Kramnik is very good in endgames, and he shows why it was and is his forte. Knight d2, a5, knight to c4, king attacks the rook, which goes to h7, and now rook b8. So white doesn't have time to take on a5, of course, because of the threat on b2. So we see king to e2. Knight is actually well placed here on c4. So the king is getting ready to protect that post. King to f5. Rook h6. Hitting this, so the knight must jump back to interpose the 6th rank. h4 by Kramnik. a4, and Kramnik brings the king. c5, knight d3, and Kramnik keeps pushing his pawn here. This will be hard to deal with, and if we add to that black has two pawn islands here and weaknesses that are difficult to protect. This looks like a difficult endgame. Wei Yi is still holding on though. Rook d8 check, king comes to c4, and knight to e4. Maybe Wei Yi should have gone for counterplay here with rook to d2, when maybe things are not that clear. Instead, we saw knight e4. After king b5, black is having a hard time keeping these pawns here on the queen side. Tried king d4, attacking the knight, but now knight to c4. White can start thinking about knight b6 takes a4. Can't take the a4 pawn now because of king takes c4. And here it looks like Wei Yi didn't find a good way to proceed here. He's losing the pawn, and he decided to play a3. I guess going for some tricks, maybe hoping for b takes a3, which is not a good move because we have have a knight check in that case. And white probably has to give up a perpetual, or might lose material. So instead he takes with a knight, and yeah, now it's not clear what black has. He went knight d6, king c6. We're hitting the knight, and after knight f7, Kramnik played a knight b5 check, and perhaps this was something Wei Yi missed. I don't know, but yeah, king d5 means that white won. So this move wasn't actually played, but in the broadcast they placed the kings on the white squares to signal that white won. So that's why the PTN files is broke. But after knight b5, black resigned. It's hard to find a move. If the king has to move, let's say, well, where to move the king really? If you put it on c4 to keep an eye on this pawn, then white can play knight d6, and we're already getting too many exchanges in, and up 2 pawns. This is too much. If the king goes in the other direction, the pawn on c5 is falling after we attack the knight with a rook. So Wei Yi had seen enough, and a nice win by Kramnik, and we'll have to see what form he is in this tournament, but a nice start. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.